Ah, a return to Nightmare Nights. Only a week after the Hearthbreakers episode. Once again, I have to believe that the second half of Season 5 was supposed to start in October and the order of the episodes had to be switched around. Still, it's a ton of fun seeing all the creative costumes the animators can come up with here. While there isn't quite as much variety as there was back in Season 2, I think the quality of the costumes is certainly improved. And having the story revolve around Fluttershy is a nice follow-up, as it touches upon yet another character who doesn't feel as though she really fits in with the rest of the crowd on this holiday, and actually presents a lesson that went against her expectations. The story begins with Fluttershy being just as overly cautious about Nightmare Night as we saw from her last time. And really, throughout this episode, we see just how awkward her fears can be around others. Which actually builds into something a little unexpected later on, but we'll get to that. What really interests me here, though, is that the whole reason Fluttershy gets out of her house to begin with is because Angel Bunny was requesting his carrots. And yet, we don't see him putting up any kind of a fuss later on when Fluttershy doesn't ever deliver. Makes me wonder whether Angel had intentionally set up this situation in order to help Fluttershy overcome her fears later on. I mean, that look on his face basically tells me he's been planning these sort of scare tactics for quite some time. I don't know. What do you think? Beyond that, we have a lot of fun new costumes to look through for each of the main 6. And I could already hear the collective "Oh, come on!" from the entire fandom when Rarity mentions the Flutterbat costume and brushes it aside. Thankfully, the writers didn't just tease that possibility, and we get to see a return of Flutterbat later on. Also, are we seeing a running gag with Applejack's costume? I mean, the first time she went as a scarecrow and now a lion? Does that mean we'll get to see her as the Tin Man next time? Anyways, I can really appreciate how this episode shows both the positives and the negatives for both Fluttershy and the rest of the main 6 when they're trying to make the best out of Nightmare Night. Fluttershy is genuinely trying her very best to fit in and keep things fun for everyone. And yet no one is attempting to force her into anything she isn't ready to do. Which actually leads into some rather entertaining bits of awkwardness when Fluttershy is putting on her own version of a spooky house. I imagine this sort of scene is one of those you either love it or you hate it moments depending on whether you can enjoy this sort of awkward humor. But as for me, I could really relate to Fluttershy's attempts here, and chuckle while remembering similar efforts from long ago. But one of the more standout moments in my opinion was the build-up of Fluttershy's fears turning into real life later on. From the more obvious setups like this one,
all those layers could slow me down, or worse, make me trip. Fluttershy had a point with the layers on the dress.
to the more subtle setups that you might actually miss.
I suppose your vision would be somewhat obscured. I can't see!
In fact, this whole episode has a bunch of blink and you'll miss it moments. Like Derpy dressing up as Princess Twilight in the background. Once again, I have to believe that at least a few people at DHX are keeping close track of what goes on in the Brony community. But the one element that really draws me in here is the message. I really like how they set up this moral. Fluttershy has always had great difficulty overcoming her fears, and with episodes far back in the past like Dragonshy, she actually needed more coaxing from the rest of the main 6 in order to step out of her comfort zone. Which, by the way, can I say how great it is that Rainbow Dash is still the one pointing out what's wrong and yet stays likable here? But this kind of story shows how much a character can grow without always needing to change. Fluttershy was willing to face her fears despite her constant hesitations, and even references the lesson she learned in Philly Vanilli. It's great to see how far she's progressed over the seasons. Yet, the episode ends with her going back to her safe place on Nightmare Night. In the end, it wasn't fears of danger that kept her from enjoying the holiday. Rather, she didn't like putting her friends in danger, even though it wasn't real. She stepped outside of her comfort zone, discovered a new talent she didn't even know she had, and even overcame her panic about Nightmare Night. Yet she didn't have to change in order to suit what others wanted. The whole episode feels like a natural follow-up to Philly Vanilli. Whereas the first lesson was all about sharing your talents and discovering something you can really enjoy, Scaremaster shows how it's okay to step back when that new activity really isn't fun for you. It was essential for the writers to show that Fluttershy had to be willing to try something new, even when she's always been afraid of it. But what made it even better was that her fears aren't what drove her back. By far, this is what really stuck out for me, and I sincerely hope each of us can remember this sort of lesson whenever we need to step outside of our comfort zones. In the meantime, though, I would love to hear from each of you. What did you think about Fluttershy's transition here? Do you believe Angel Bunny had ulterior motives when sending Fluttershy out in the first place? What was your favorite standout moment amongst all the chase scenes? I would like to hear your thoughts on Scaremaster, and here's looking forward to even more episodes that challenge our expectations and inspire us to grow. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.
What happened?
I just told you, darling. A mannequin came to life, haunted all the costumes.